Filibusters and unanimous consent agreements.
The history of the use of filibusters in the United States Senate. For starters, a filibuster in the United States Senate most likely refers to any obstructive ways that were used to stop a measure from being brought to a vote. Ways that it was used in the past. The use of debate and cloture increased over the post-World War II period. Filibusters have changed their forms, and threats to filibusters have become more consistent than actual talking on the floor. In the 1950s, filibusters were not common whatsoever. In the 1960s, they increased and increased again by the 1970s. By the late 1980s through the 1990s, they were very commonly occurring at more than one filibuster a month, sometimes considerably more if the Senate was in session and counted. In the late 1930s, the late 1960s, filibusters were aimed toward killing legislation that occurred when filibustering was strongly associated with civil rights. And below, I have some statistics that I got from the Lanahan book. Take a look at it if you'd like. I found these on page 162 through 164 under Barbara Sinclair, the 60-vote Senate.
Structure of a filibuster. Filibusters are only used in the Senate. The main objective of a filibuster is to delay voting or completely rule out voting on a bill or measure. In a filibuster, a senator speaks for a lengthy amount of time. A senator cannot sit down or take any breaks while having the floor. Senators can take questions without yielding the floor. This allows fellow senators to give the speaker a break. However, the speaker can't leave the room. In a filibuster, a senator can talk about whatever he wants. He can read a book or talk about why Jay Cutler has 77 interceptions since joining the Chicago Bears. Ever heard of an intended receiver? If a senator does not need to use the bathroom, he can yield the floor for another senator, and when the senator returns, gain the floor back. Filibusters can last a long time. The longest filibuster lasted 24 hours and 18 minutes and was spoken by Strom Thurmond in 1957. That's a long time.
The filibuster has had changes. One of these is the nuclear option, and it is somewhat controversial. The nuclear option changed the old Senate rules to allow all executive branch and most judicial nominations to be approved by a simple majority of senators as opposed to the 3/5 supermajority. So executive and judicial nominations to be approved by 51 votes instead of the original 60. This is called nuclear because it completely marginalizes the minority party of the Senate when the majority party also has a member elected president. The impact this has had is that the presidential, executive, and judicial nominees can be easily confirmed if their party is the majority party of the Senate. The minority party has lost their power to oppose these nominations.
Unanimous consent agreements. Since the 1950s, the Senate has done most of its work through UCAs. UCAs are a unanimous consent request setting terms for the consideration of a specific bill. These agreements are usually proposed by the majority leader or floor manager of the measure and reflect negotiations among senators interested in the measure. Many are time agreements, which limit the time available for debate and specify who will control that time. Many also allow only a list of specific amendments. They may also contain other provisions, such as empowering the majority leader to call up the measure at will or specifying when considerations will begin or end.